Everyone, Liam here. Welcome to this week's YouTube video. This week we're going to be going over how I kit bashed the Terminator Chaplain that you can see on screen. This video is going to be the first in a series based around how I'm building and painting my Sythes of the Emperor army for 40k. Hopefully you find it useful, potentially entertaining, but regardless, let me know what you think in the comments below. I really appreciate the feedback, and naturally I want to make these videos as good as possible. If you do want to share your own work, feel free to check out the Discord. We've got an amazing community over there. It's completely free and I'd love to see your work. But enough of my ramble, let's crack on with the video. So this is the Games Workshop Terminator Chaplain that's just come out. I really like the new Space Marines and I'm a big fan of all of the new releases. This one I do like, it just missed the mark a little bit for me. The issue that I have with it is twofold. First of all, the torso is very lackluster in comparison to the rest of the model, and the pose is a little bit dull for such a interesting character. So considering this is going to be effectively the leader of my Sythes of the Emperor army that I'm doing, it needs to be a little bit special, or it needs to be at least more special than the current model. And I'm really not trying to bag on GW here. Like, I love Games Workshop models. I'm not the sort of person who's going to make a YouTube video who just tries to bring them down for clicks. I really am a fan. It's just this particular one wasn't as exciting as I wanted it to be. So we're going to make it hopefully a little bit more interesting. Now, I don't want to spend huge amounts of money on kit bashing a model, so I grabbed one of my Leviathan captains. I've got 2 or 3 of them laying around just because they're a dime a dozen, let's be honest. The Leviathan Terminator captains, and I'm going to use that as a donor model. So what I've done is I've prepped all of the pieces for the Terminator captain that I'm going to be using, and I've prepped all of the pieces for the chaplain that I'm going to be using. So the main thing that I'm going to be using for the Terminator, from the Terminator captain, is the arms and the torso. The chaplain itself, I'm going to be using the legs, the shield, and the head. So the idea of this is we're just going to kind of try and kit bash these together and get something that really works. The biggest piece of this is going to be trying to save that torso. So it's going to be basically swapping the legs. That's going to be the most awkward part, because obviously these are 2 different models and it's got to make sense with the pose. And the chaplain legs are a little bit bigger. You won't notice it at the end, especially with the cloak from the Terminator captain. On the upside, the chaplain head, as you can just see, just slides straight in. So that's really simple. It's just a case of removing the plug from the Terminator captain, the back of the head of the Terminator captain, and then sliding the chaplain head in place. That's simple. The Terminator Chaplain's shield arm goes on his right arm. I want it on the left, so we're going to have a little of a play around with the hands. And then I've got this scythe from the Death Guard kit. Now, I do like this scythe. It's a little bit on the nose, I know, for Sythes of the Emperor, but it fits the chaplain and it fits the chapter. My only problem with this is what I did find, and this is something that I find quite a lot, is actually the Forge World stuff can tend to be a bit plain in comparison to the GW stuff. So I might have to come back to this in the future and do some green stuff work, but I definitely don't want to do that at the moment. So some of this is going to be quite simple. Some of it is going to be a little bit more challenging. First things first, we need to slice off the legs. Now I'm just using some hobby clippers for this. So this is obviously slicing the legs off the Terminator captain. It comes as one piece with the torso. The chaplain, nice enough. The legs come completely separate. So you can see that I've just clipped off the 2 legs at the thighs. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to start being a little bit more careful, start being a little bit more precise. Now I can, on the upside, this chaplain has thigh plates, which is what I was just checking on the sprue. The thigh plates on the chaplain are completely separate to the legs, which means I don't have to try and save those thigh plates on the actual captain. I can just cut them off. So all we're trying to do here is everything from his chest below, so even the stomach is going to go, because if you look at the legs on the chaplain, the legs are obviously all the legs, the thighs and the stomach. So we're going to slice off all of the belt, which is a bit of a shame because I like the belt on the captain and it would have fit for this. but it is what it is. So once we've got all the big chunks out of the way, so you can see I'm still using clippers here because none of this needs to be particularly careful. I just have to be careful once I start getting towards that chest. As soon as I start getting towards that aquila, I have to be really, really careful because I don't want to damage it. And that's where the X-Acto blade comes in, the knife. Now what I would say to you with this is be careful. I'm notorious for being really quite careless and I'm always cutting myself. So if you're going to do this, my recommendation would be for a start, you're going to use the X-Acto blade, use new blades so they're really sharp. Now, I know that might seem a bit crazy to some people, but what you want to do is you want to remove very small pieces of plastic at once, right? Don't remove massive chunks like I'm doing right here. You want to do very, very small pieces. And if you do that with a new blade, what happens is you get very little resistance and there's very little chance of you actually cutting yourself. So be careful with this. The other thing is on the inside of the torso, I'm removing all of the like the plug and everything from the inside of the torso because potentially what's going to happen is the legs are going to have to be pushed up into the torso. So I'm trying to make some space. You can see here I'm slicing away very carefully, or carefully. You be more careful. Do as I say, not do as I do, as I say. I'm a nightmare with this sort of stuff. But gradually remove the excess plastic so you've just got the upper torso, right? So you've just got that chest plate. So you can see I'm slicing it off and then I'm scraping the last little bits so it's nice and smooth. This takes time, right? You really need to be patient with this. Don't rush it. If you rush it, you're going to hurt yourself, and worse, you're going to damage the model. Pick which one's worse. For me, it's worse to damage the model. So really, really slow. Take your time. Decent blade. Do not use a blunt blade. If you use a blunt blade, you'll probably end up damaging the model as well, where you try and force it. So yeah. As for the actual connection point, I had enough of a connection point between the torso, even though it's hollow, and the legs to just glue it, which you'll see very soon. If for whatever reason you've, in your conversion or your kit bash, whatever you want to call it, if for whatever reason you get to a point where there's not a lot of contact point between the torso and the legs, or anything else you're doing, my recommendation would be is to get a big chunk of green stuff, right? Green stuff is really, really tacky. So what you can do is you can fill the hole with green stuff and then press the legs, in this case, into the green stuff. Now that in itself won't stick, but if you place super glue between the contact points of the plastic and the green stuff, it will stick. Now you're still going to be able to stretch that green stuff apart, but once you leave it for 3 or 4 hours, you're going to have a rock solid connection. So that's how I do it normally. Just because what happens is it gives you a lot of movement and flexibility as well. Because even if you glue the plastic to the green stuff, you can still move that green stuff and reposition everything. So I don't need to do that in this case, but it's something to bear in mind. Just be very be very thoughtful about the fact that you're going to need to potentially move these legs quite a lot. And what you're going to find with this, like at the moment, I'm just slicing out big chunks of the center of the behind the torso, just so I can fit those legs in, so I can fit the guy's core into the actual torso and have some movement to adjust it. Now although I'm doing this conversion now, I'm not going to glue these legs on until the end, because I want to know what it looks like once the arms go on, because I don't want to have to repose the arms, because that means that I'm going to have to do some sculpting, and I really don't want that for this particular piece. So normally I would be doing legs, then arms, then head. In this case, I'm going to do the arms first, and I'm going to adjust the position of the legs for however the arms sit. So I'm going to glue the torso together now, so the back piece of the torso and the actual front piece of the torso. So that's all in one piece, and then I'm going to leave the legs off. So as I said, normally I would have the torso and the leg glued together so I can get the body position. In this case, I'm not going to do that because I don't want to have to convert the arms, and I don't have that many arms. Speaking of which, the Forge World scythe, the first thing that I'm doing is just slicing out the hand. Now, I really don't like resin. I'm going to be honest, I'm not a big fan, and this is nothing to do with Forge World. I'm just not a fan of resin in general. Forge World is a lot better than it used to be. but I'm just not a fan. There is one big benefit of this. So one of the big benefits when it comes to conversions is the fact that you can just get a hairdryer and you can just warm it up and move it. So that means if you've got anything where you need to put like a pin through it, you can very easily heat it up, reposition them, and then what will happen is you can put your pin in place, and I'll show you what I'm talking about in a second, and then you can heat it up and move it back again. So it gives you a huge amount of flexibility, which you don't have with plastic. So you can see right now I'm trying to basically drill into the shaft of this, and it's bending that resin, right? What's probably going to happen is I'm going to snap it like this. It's just really awkward to get to. By the time I start drilling into that, the pin vise, the pin is probably, like the drill is probably going to snap that resin. And this can be incredibly frustrating, especially when you're using plastic models, wet plastic pieces. But with resin, there's a really easy way around it. Yes, it's very flexible, but we still don't want to take the risk, especially as Forge World resin specifically is quite expensive. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to get a hairdryer, which you're not going to see because it's going to be off camera, but we're going to get a hairdryer and we're going to heat up the resin piece, and we're going to bend it into a different position. So what this is going to do is hopefully it's going to save us a lot of stress, because we're not going to have to worry about snapping the piece, and it gives us a very easy way to drill and work with this. So once we start drilling, you want to try and get this, you need to get this hole as central as possible. My drill bit's a little bit too big actually as well. Make sure you got the right size drill bit, but I couldn't find my smaller one. So what I would say to you is when you're drilling these holes, make sure you score a mark first. So you haven't seen me do it on this one. I've just started drilling. But when we get onto the next bit, I'll show you. But basically what I'll do is I'll get the tip of the X-Acto blade, and which is what I'm doing here. So I'll get the tip of the X-Acto blade and I'll score just a shallow mark, right? So the idea with this is when you put the drill bit in place, it stops it from slipping and stops it from going into your finger, or at least hopefully stops it from going into your finger. The other thing is while you're drilling as well, if you can brace the model against the desk. So if the drill bit slips like it's slipping here, it slips into the desk and not your finger. And if the drill bit is slipping the way it is on that video, then I would say you need to score a deeper mark, right? It shouldn't be doing that. So again, you can see me going back with that X-Acto blade, and I'm making that mark even deeper. So when I go back in with this drill, it should hold its position, and then I'm hopefully not going to stab myself. So just be careful. I know I always say that I'm not, and I'm not, because I'm just irresponsible as a general rule. So just be careful with it. You can see that I'm now heating up the scythe again, bending it back into position. So I haven't damaged it. So I'm trying to be responsible with this. I'm just honestly like, if these were really cheap, I probably wouldn't care so much, but 5 weapons from Forge World are not cheap, and even if you buy them from bit sites, they're like 2 or 3 quid. So anyway, you can see the scythe is now back into its correct position. So what we've got to do is we've got to put a pin through it, but before we do that, we need to make sure that hand fits. So dry fit everything. This is really, really important. So we dry fit the hand. Are we happy with it? Yes or no? If we're not, we need to change the position of the cuts. This one was absolutely fine. It needed a few small adjustments, like just a little bit of cleanup, but that was it. As for the pin, what I did do is I drilled all the way through the hand, so I can put the pin all the way through. With this as well, you don't need to do this. I prefer, when I'm doing something like this, to drill the hole in the hand a little bit bigger than the pin, same as in the weapon. The reason why I do this is because it gives me some flexibility. So it lets me move the position of the hand rather than it just being stuck exactly where I've drilled those holes. You don't need to do that. Not everyone likes to do it. It's just what I like to do. So you'll see it here. I drop the glue into the hole in the hand, and then when I push the pin through, the pin will not sit straight. There's a big gap on either side of the pin. At the end of the day, the super glue, as I work that pin in and out, the super glue fills and it will glue it rock solid. But for me, I want that pin to be able to move, so it gives me some flexibility in the position of the hand with the scythe, so I make sure that I can actually line it up. Obviously the pin that I've used is massive, so once that's dry, I'm just going to snip off half of it so it's the right size. But again, like, for me, because I'm not a particularly careful person, as a general rule, I do it in a way where I can make up for those potential issues. Now, you don't need to do that. If you're quite precise and very careful, you'll probably be a lot better than me at this sort of stuff, at kit bashing, conversions, and all sorts of stuff. This is just how I make up for it. So you can see me inserting the pin in, making sure it fits okay. Next thing is obviously glue. Now, even with super glue, you should have a few seconds to work with the position of this hand. So you should be able to get the pins in place and then twist the weapon so you get it at the right angle. And what I would say is you can see me like working it in and out a few times. That's because the super glue kind of sits on like a little bit of a bubble on the inside, on the outside of the actual hole. Whereas if you work the pin in and out, it pops the bubble and it makes the super glue go into the actual hole that you've drilled, which works for me. So you can see me playing with this now. I keep moving the weapon around the hand. You can see there's a little bit of a gap and it's too far over. Because the pin is loose in that hole, it gives me lots of movement to make sure that that weapon isn't going to be sitting like too close to the palm or too close to the back of the hand or too close to the knuckles or anything like that. So again, like, it gives me loads of flexibility. That's something that's really important. We're going to move on to the Storm Bolter next, or rather the Storm Shield. So the first thing that we need to do is slice the Storm Bolter off of the arm. Apparently, an extra wound from the Storm Shield is a really big deal. I don't know. I haven't played 40k in years, and I'm frankly learning it all anew. Anyway, this is probably a good time for a plug. For any of you guys who are here watching this video still, if you are looking to improve your painting and improve your miniature work, feel free to check out the members area. You can just sign up through YouTube memberships. You get additional video content and much more in-depth video content, including a in-depth fundamental series on how to improve your painting, as well as all the project logs that I've got going on or have been doing. It means a huge amount and it keeps the channel going. Thank you very much, and I really appreciate everyone who does support me through the membership program, through Patreon and YouTube. But as always, not everyone can support with money, and I appreciate that. So if you hit the like button, please subscribe if you're enjoying the content. And you know what? If you want to be part of the community, as I said at the beginning of this video, join in the Discord and share some work. We'd absolutely love to see you there. But without further ado, you can still see me scraping off this Storm Bolter. The handle of the actual Storm Bolter itself I'm going to keep, because that fits really well with just him holding onto the handle of the shield. I'm just going to slice off the bottom of the hilt is all. Be very careful with this. You can see that I'm slicing off quite large chunks. Once again, do smaller chunks, right? Nice sharp blade, smaller chunks, very, very slowly, so you don't put a huge amount of pressure on yourself, so you're not, or the model, so you're not going to slice into you. For anyone who's even mildly experienced in this hobby knows, these blades hurt like a lot. And there can be quite a lot of blood, so be careful. And honestly, it's really quite funny. One of the things that you know from an experienced hobbyist is the amount of scars that they have on their thumb. But anyway, I digress. So you can see me slicing the Storm Bolt was now gone. As long as we get this relatively flat, that's all that matters. And then what you want to do is just sand it smooth, because some of that hand is still going to be shown. So you can see me scraping it nice and smooth. And then what I would suggest you do is get a bit of sandpaper as well and just sand it so it's all nice and smooth, so it looks nice. But that works. The next thing that you're also going to have to do, you've got to think about how the Storm Shield is going to connect to that hand. So you're probably going to have to slice down a little bit of the flat of the hand, the outside of the hand, and start playing with dry fitting the fit for the Storm Shield, because you do need it relatively flat. And this is what I'm going to start doing now. The other thing, the way that I'm doing this, I didn't want to have to slice the hand off. Well, I couldn't slice the hand off because the hand that connects to the Storm Shield on the Chaplain is the wrong side. So in this case, I kept the Storm Bolter hand. And what I ended up doing is, as you can see, slightly slicing off the bottom and then gluing the actual hand to the shield. Now, it kind of just looks like it's floating. So the handle from the original Chaplain hand, I sliced the hand off and then basically I glued these 2 bits of plastic to the top and bottom of the hand. Now, this isn't the cleanest work here, but what you need to remember is you do not see the storm shield from the inside. The model is black, and if someone's looking at your model from the underneath, then you probably want to tell them to get their hands off your bloody models anyway. So it's really not a big deal. If you were doing this for a competition, then I'd be talking to you about resculpting this completely to make sure that it's right. But this is a tabletop piece, and it's part of a piece that is never going to be seen, right? You're just not going to see it, especially when the whole thing is black because he's a chaplain. So kept it really simple, glued the hand onto the shield, and then trying to keep this in focus. It's proper small. And then what I'm doing, if I can grab them, there we go, is I'm placing on the top of the top and bottom of the handle from the original chaplain hand that held on the storm shield. Now, I've got fat fingers and I'm incredibly clumsy, so you can see that I've stabbed this part of the model with an X-Acto blade. You will not see that tiny little stab mark because I haven't pressed incredibly hard, and I'm just sliding it into place. And I've got no issues like showing off like this is not a perfect conversion, because people are always talking about how like they have to have everything that's this amazing masterpiece, and it's frankly not true, especially when you're doing tabletop stuff, right? If I spent the amount of time painting on every army model that I was doing as I could, I would finish in about 40 years, right? It's just ridiculous. So what you need to remember is you need to pick the standard that you are happy with this army. Now, this looks fine. You're only going to notice any issues here is if you look really up close. And as I said, you're not going to see it because it's facing downwards and it's facing towards the model and it's black. So that's good enough. It's good enough for me. If you wanted to improve on it, the fact is you'd probably have to scrape down the inside of that shield to make sure it was all flat. And then you'd probably have to clean it up with some green stuff. If you want to do that, that's great. That's your choice. But you don't need to panic about it. It's not that important. It's never going to be seen. Now, I'm gluing the arms on. Again, this is a weird thing to do normally because we would want to glue the legs on first. But I'm happy with the arms. I'm happy with the shield kind of slightly to the like outer to the left, and then the scythe kind of like held alongside him going backwards. Now, I've played with the legs, so I know what position they're going to be in, and I know I'm going to want the head looking towards the shield direction. So nice and simple. I'm now going to place the head in. So the head and the arms are now going to dictate the position that I want the legs in. But bearing in mind, I have already dry fitted those legs, right? So it's not like I don't know where they're going to go. So the head is turning a little bit. I'm not a big fan of heads facing directly forwards. It generally looks very boring, very unnatural. I know that seems ridiculous, but it does to me anyway, but it's definitely boring. So you can already see we have some imposing, like he looks quite imposing. Now, I've got a choice to make here. Those legs, this is the position that I want the legs. I really like them. I can either have him leaning forward slightly, which makes him quite hunched and intimidating, or I can have him kind of like walking, like standing almost upright, which makes him a little bit taller and a bit easier to see from above, if that makes sense. But I decided that, do you know what? Most people are going to be looking at it from across the tabletop. And when it comes to photos, I can take the photo from whatever angle I wanted. So I decided to go with something a little bit more intimidating. So what I've actually got is when I glue these legs on, I'm going to do him leaning forward a little bit so he's a little bit more hunched. The gap in that torso, the big hole in the torso before I glue that gap that you see right now on the left, that big hole, that's the hole that I would probably fill with a little bit of green stuff if you don't have enough contact points for this to dry properly. I didn't have that issue, but it's a really handy little tip. Glue the green stuff in, glue the legs to the green stuff. That will hold as long as you don't rip it out, and then you can just basically twist and move those legs around because the green stuff is flexible. And then when you leave it, it's going to dry perfectly. It's going to dry perfectly solid, sorry. And that's basically it for the conversion. So really, really straightforward. Well, relatively straightforward, I think, for a nice kit bash. And I'm really happy with the result. You can see me slicing the back of this, his bum, basically. just because it keeps hitting against the cape. So I'm just slicing it a little bit so it sits flush with the cape. That's all that is. But again, I'm really happy with this. The next step after this is just basically add the details that come with the model. So whatever the, I don't know, the tassely things are that go onto his groin that comes with the chaplain, and little details like that that just come part of the clip. And that's it for this week. Thank you very much for watching. It means a huge amount to me. As I said previously, if you did like the video, hit the like button. And if you want to see more, make sure you hit the subscribe button. It makes a massive, massive difference to the growth of the channel. Cheers.